All right, today we're going to dig into this really powerful idea that kind of flips our whole perspective on scarcity and abundance. It's this concept that for our daily needs, God doesn't just create something out of nothing. He actually multiplies what we already have. So let's dive in.
I mean, have you ever been there? You're staring down this huge mountain. Maybe it's a financial problem, a massive project at work, a personal crisis, and you look at what you've got to work with and you just think, there is no way. This is not enough. It's that sinking feeling, right? That feeling of being completely overwhelmed. But what if we're looking at it all wrong? So that brings us to our first section, the problem of scarcity. The source material we're looking at today frames this not really as a lack of stuff, but more as a problem of focus.
Our default setting, as humans, is to see the gap. We fixate on what's missing, the money we don't have, the connections we lack, the skills we haven't learned yet. But this analysis suggests that the real issue is that we fail to see the value in the small things we actually do have.
And this brings us to section 2, and really the core idea of this whole explainer. It's about a fundamental shift in our thinking, away from what's missing and towards something way more powerful.
See, the solution, according to this principle, isn't about sitting around waiting for a miracle shipment of resources to drop out of the sky. No, it's about taking the little bit you have, offering it up, and then watching it get multiplied. It all starts with what's already in your hand, no matter how small it seems.
So let's put a clear definition on this. We're talking about divine multiplication. It's this biblical principle that God increases what's already there. But look at the fine print. It's in response to faith, obedience, and stewardship. This is key. It's not a passive thing where you just wait. It's a partnership. Your participation is actually required.
Now, to really get our heads around this, the source points us to two incredible stories. They're separated by centuries, but they perfectly show this principle in action.
So on one side, you've got a widow who is completely destitute. I mean, she's about to lose her sons to debt collectors. And what's her only asset? One little jar of oil. Then on the other side, you have a massive, hungry crowd, thousands of people, and the only food anyone can find is a little boy's lunch. In both situations, the need is gigantic, and the resource, well, it's almost laughably small.
Let's look at the widow's story first. The prophet Elisha shows up, and what's so fascinating is the first question he asks. He doesn't offer her a handout, he completely redirects her focus. He says, "What do you have in your house?" He's basically telling her, stop looking at your debt and start looking at your assets, no matter how tiny. And her answer is so telling. She says, nothing except a little jar of oil. She almost didn't even count it.
And this process is just brilliant. First, she has to acknowledge what she has, that little bit of oil. Second, she's told to prepare for more by gathering a ton of empty jars. She's literally creating capacity for a miracle. Then she has to act in faith. She has to start pouring. And get this, the oil multiplies as she's pouring. And here's the kicker, the most important part, the oil only stopped when she ran out of jars. Her preparation, the capacity she created, actually set the limit for her provision. Wow.
Okay, now let's jump over to our second story and see how this plays out again. The disciples are in an impossible situation. Feed a giant crowd in the middle of nowhere. It's Andrew who finds a boy with his tiny lunch, 5 barley loaves and 2 small fish. It's not much, but it's something.
And the result? That tiny little lunch fed 5,000 men. And that wasn't even counting the women and children. The scale of this multiplication is just mind-boggling. It goes from hopelessly inadequate to overwhelmingly abundant.
But check out the specific sequence of events here. Jesus takes the small offering, he gives thanks for it before it's multiplied, then he breaks it, has the disciples hand it out, and then, and this is so important, he has them gather up all the leftovers. Gratitude comes before the increase, and good stewardship protects the abundance that follows. Nothing is wasted. So, what do these two ancient stories really teach us? Well, when you place them side by side, a really clear pattern starts to emerge. You can see the conditions that are necessary for this kind of multiplication to happen.
This table just lays it out so clearly. Both stories kick off with a desperate human need. In both, a tiny human resource is found. Then a specific instruction is given that requires simple obedience. And in both cases, the outcome isn't just enough, it's abundance. The widow pays her debt and has money left over. The crowd is fed and they have baskets of leftovers. The pattern is clear. It's a divine human cooperation.
So the big takeaway is this. These aren't just stories about passive miracles. They're about active partnership, Faith demands action. The widow had to pour. The disciples had to distribute. Our preparation, our capacity can actually determine the size of the outcome. And finally, managing the results wisely. That stewardship is what protects and sustains that new abundance.
Okay, so this is all really fascinating as history, but what about us, right here, right now? How does this actually apply to our lives? Let's translate this whole framework into some practical action.
First, you have to ask yourself, what is my jar of oil? What are my 5 loaves and 2 fish? It could be a small skill you have, a creative idea, a little bit of savings, a friendship. You have to recognize it and value it. Second, you have to act. When you get that nudge, that instruction, obedience is what unlocks the potential. Third, prepare for more. Start creating the systems, the mindset, the space for things to grow. And finally, practice gratitude for what you have now and be a good steward of whatever increase comes your way.
Ultimately, the most powerful message from this entire analysis is one of incredible hope. That feeling of not enough, it's not a permanent condition. It's just the starting point. It's the raw material for a miracle of multiplication.
And I just want to leave you with this final thought from the source material, because it wraps this whole idea up so perfectly. This reframes our limitations not as liabilities, but as amazing opportunities. So the question isn't, how little do I have? The real question is, what am I willing to do with the little I've been given?